have trouble speaking normal English, so a lot of these names I'm going to screw up. Okay, so welcome to Damage Control Podcast.
Damage Control Podcasting.
Damage Control Podcasting, episode 9.5, the Misaktonic episode.
Oh.
So I am here with
Daniel Newkirk.
Connor Cornwell.
Okay, so last episode we did vampires, werewolves, and kaiju. I wanted to do Lovecraftian monsters, but we were hitting 3 hours, so I begrudgingly got Daniel and Connor here today to do a mini episode. Any quick shout outs about Lovecraft before I get into it?
He who shall not be named.
Ooh, that comes up later.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
Anything?
We'll just get started and we'll see what goes from
Fair
there.
enough. So we'll start.
Get to work, Adam.
Yeah. So we'll start with the easy. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born August 20th, 1890, and died March 15th, 1937. Gained fame mostly after death with influential works in horror fiction. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. All right, starting easy. The Cthulhu. Right?
Cthulhu.
Cthulhu mythos is a shared fictional universe based on Lovecraft's work, coined by August Derleth, right?
I think that's how you say it.
Okay, who contributed to the mythos. A shared universe where authors added stories and are considered canon. Lovecraft was very in favor of this.
Yeah, absolutely. He would have, if I remember right, he would have meetings where he would have just a bunch of writers come in like once a year, twice a year, and they would just sit and write and hang out. They were all kind of part of his mythos. And there was a lot of talk that maybe that wasn't just like a writer's group, but like a cult.
Yeah, he was friends with Robert Howard, the Conan guy, right?
Oh, Robert Howard.
Yeah.
Oh, Robert
Right?
Howard.
Yeah? Isn't that who writes Conan?
I thought it was Arthur Conan Doyle. No, he wrote.
That was Sherlock.
Yeah, you're right.
Holmes.
Sorry, my fault.
Like I think they had a couple of things where they put like characters in each other's stories and like nods and shout outs, that sort of thing.
Okay. All right. You want me to tread water while you look it up?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we get the right name.
Okay. Well, a hallmark of Lovecraft's work is cosmic-isms, the sense that ordinary life is a thin shell over a reality that is so alien and abstract in comparison that merely contemplating it would change the sanity of the ordinary person.
Yep, Robert E. Howard.
Okay.
Yep. So we got the right name there.
Don't make me read that sentence over again. That was tough.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
No, but yeah, I exactly what you're talking about. I was reading a little bit of Conan stuff, and they reference an elder entity that was Cthulhu instead of Cthulhu, but other than that, the name was pretty similar, and Conan kind of seemed like a prelude to a lot of H.P. Lovecraft's stuff, like the fantasy version where Lovecraft did the 1920s investigation stuff.
Right.
Anything else?
Oh, there might have been a couple other. I can't remember any other authors right off the top of my head. That's the one I can think of.
We'll throw them out if you remember. Cut me off at any point in time. It'll be fine. Okay, so let's talk about themes of Lovecraftian horror. In a big word right off the bat. Anthropocentrism?
Anthropomorphism?
Anti-anthropocentrism.
Oh, wow, that is a word.
Which is that humans are not the center of the universe, that they're just another small small dot in the universe, in misanthropy. That's two very... Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, Lovecraftian always had these things that were so much bigger than the rest of the people, anyway. And then, like, you have, just conceptually, like, why is Earth the center of the universe? Like, there's so much more space that it makes more sense that these giant entities are more important than we are.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that he would, or at least people later describe it as, like, most of the higher things don't influence much things because they have the same regard for humans as a human might have to a single bacterium.
Fair enough. Okay, second theme is a preoccupation with viscerate texture. Lovecraft stories tend to involve more semi-gelatinous substances such as slime, rather than standard horror elements such as blood, guts, and corpses and stuff.
Yes, I believe he even had a monster that was nothing but a living color.
What was that?
Oh yeah, it's the was it blue, green, like the living.
I think it was supposed to be green, but it was supposed to be one of those things like you cannot really perceive the actual color. But like I guess like from what I've seen, every description of the color out of space has been some kind of sickly greenish color. I think it was described in the work at some point, but like the actual color might be something else.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of weird things like that. A lot of Lovecraftian monsters are giant blob-like things with no real shapes or edges.
You think that's why Cthulhu is so? Is that right?
Yeah, Cthulhu.
You think that's why he's so popular? Because he actually has a shape. He looks cooler in an action figure than Azathoth does. That's what that right?
I think that's fair, but I don't know why Cthulhu got so much bigger than the rest of the entities did.
I guess it's because he just has a recognizable form. I mean, he's pretty much just a dragon with an octopus for a head. I mean, like physically, but not like
Plus,
I never really thought about that, but you're right.
Plus, isn't he on the sunken ship in the Pirates movies? Didn't he pilot that?
Oh yeah, old Davy Jones, Captain Cthulhu.
Yeah. Okay, there's a lot of big words in this episode. Okay, another trope or theme is antiquarian writing style. Even when dealing with up-to-date technology, Lovecraft tended to use anachronisms as well as old-fashioned words when dealing with such things. For example, he'd use the term man of science rather than the modern word scientist.
Yeah, I think that really gave a different flavor to a lot of his works. You got this kind of feeling that this old-timey, almost like like when we were talking on the steampunk episode, kind of vaudevillain feel to some of his terminology, and I think it was more immersive that way. Yeah. I mean, to me, when you say man of science, I see Dr. Frankenstein in his lab with all the bubbling beakers, rather than I see a guy looking into a microscope.
Yeah, they don't make science labs like they do anymore with like the Tesla coils that don't really do anything.
Yeah, exactly. All the increase the Flash Gordon sound and put more science stuff.
Yeah,
rev up the theremin.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be cool if like CSI had like stuff like that rather than the actual stuff.
That'd be so much more interesting. Run this DNA test, lightning bolt between two Jacob's ladders.
Enhance.
I'd watch it.
I'd watch it too.
Okay.
CSI Transylvania.
Detachment. Lovecraftian heroes, both in original writings and more modern adaptations, tend to be socially isolated, reclusive individuals, usually with an academic or scholarly intent to compensate for social shortcomings.
Well, it might just be conjecture, but I think that's like him writing a lot of himself into those protagonists. From what I hear described, that's a lot of how he was.
Okay. Go ahead.
Aside from his circle of friends, he was almost like a relative shut-in at certain points in his life, and
yeah, it was.
Didn't that why he died poor? Because he refused to self-promote himself, even though he probably was sitting on a gold mine. Oh, he was sitting on a gold mine.
Yeah, I mean, what happened to him is, I would almost equate it to Edgar Allan Poe, almost, who died a drug addict in a gutter somewhere. H.P. Lovecraft, I mean, he had a really good life for him, and then I feel like, in real world speak, he fell to mental illness.
What did he get?
I believe it was kind of a form of agoraphobia almost, because he was very much a recluse and a shut-in. Which to me, almost, if you look at the rest of real world, the more mystical side, I think it almost puts more emphasis on his storylines. Like maybe his stories drove him mad rather than he was going mad while he was writing the stories.
Or maybe he was telling us the truth.
Exactly. I mean, my favorite Elder God particularly has a book that drives people insane just by reading it.
Which one was that?
Haster.
Oh,
he
King,
should,
King in Yellow. King in Yellow?
King in Yellow, yeah. He who should not be named shall not be named.
Because Haster's got the whole play associate him, also called the King in Yellow, and when it goes around, there'll be like back alley theaters or like off Broadway sort of thing. Is well, they'll start putting on the play, and then it'll slowly cause people to go insane, and then bad things start happening in the city, and the city just completely falls into anarchy after a certain amount of time. And supposedly, the character, the King in Yellow, is like never actually cast. It's always he just shows up, and either it's Haster himself, like an avatar of him, or something along those lines. And he wears a mask, and apparently you don't want to know what's behind the mask.
Fair enough. But I kind of do.
Oh, I mean, if you're going to unmask someone and... Okay, now we need Scooby-Doo meets Haster, and it's Old Man Jenkins behind the mask.
So is he... You and Mike Stanford to tell me what a Peggy Sue... Not a Peggy Sue.
Mary Sue.
Mary Sue. So is he a Mary Sue then? Is all of his characters Mary Sues?
I have always heard Mary Sue as a different term than how Mike said it. Mike said that Mary Sue was a personification of the author, where to me, a Mary Sue in literature is a character without flaws.
That's what I thought it was. It was the chosen one that...
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the person who could do no wrong, had no flaws, everything they did was perfect. It's the person in the action movies that has the as my friend would call it, the magical Jesus rocket launcher that hits anything. And that to my understanding is a Mary Sue. But yeah, H.P. Lovecraft, I would agree with Connor, that really wrote a lot of himself into his books.
Okay.
Now, whether those are the protagonists or the demons,
or the gods, I mean.
the entities, or the cultists, who really knows? But I do feel like he wrote a lot of himself.
Yeah, I think that because of that, what really qualifies a Mary Sue is because he mostly portrayed the negative parts of himself in the characters, and less of like his positive aspects. Again, probably because of the depression sort of thing, he always focused on the worst parts of himself and wrote about that.
Oh, good point.
Yeah. So what's the opposite of a Mary Sue?
Peggy Sue.
Peggy Sue.
Yeah.
Peggy Jane, maybe.
Peggy Jane. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. Another trope, if we will, helplessness and hopelessness. Usually the heroes' victims are temporary. They usually pay a price for it. Subjects often find themselves completely unable to simply run away, instead driven by some other force to their desperate end. So even if they win, they lose, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm definitely leaning on you guys because I have never read a single Lovecraftian story.
Yeah, with Lovecraft, I really feel like they really grabbed that noir feeling that was kind of based in the 1920s anyway, where in the end there really isn't anyone who wins. There's just people who lose less, and you get that. So I would say, yeah, that kind of hopelessness really ties into some of the noir. I mean, if they're going to do a modern H.P. Lovecraft movie, I think scenes should be in black and white.
Should it be modern, though? Because it sounds like he kind of digs the old technology, so should it even be set in the modern time?
Yeah, definitely. It should be 1920s. I mean, if they make a Lovecraftian movie in today's era, it should be shot in 1920s, black and white, maybe with some splatter of color like Sin City.
I got one coming up. I'll let you know about it.
Right on.
And going back to the thing about the sense of hopelessness, even in the books that the protagonist doesn't just generally die right off the bat, even if they sort of win, it's mostly a Pyrrhic victory where it's like, okay, you've won for now. The guy you're fighting will outlive you. You are nothing on his time scale. You have prevented one thing out of the millions that are going to occur afterwards.
Won the battle, not the war.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a great way to put how a lot of the happy, quote-unquote, happy endings in Lovecraft work.
Okay. Let's see, we got unanswered questions. Characters in Lovecraft stories rarely, if ever, fully understand what is happening to them, and often go insane if they try.
Yeah, I think, and I honestly think that's something that we should see more in different types of cinema, especially horror cinema, that we do not need an exposition machine for everything. Sometimes that old adage, less is more, is correct. Yeah. The unknown is just as more terrifying than the known.
Yeah, I heard that a lot of times he would try to describe a lot of the things as loosely as he could and try to let the viewer, or reader as it were, like fill in the blanks with their imagination. So like you would get your own personal horror with just kind of a guideline and not like, okay, here's the thing, he looks like this, he looks like that. What, like, you know, I guess that kind of backfired a little bit because like the one he described the most completely, Cthulhu, became the most popular. But it still works, in my opinion, at least.
It's kind of like, do any of you guys listen to Clutch?
No, I do not. No.
Okay. The lead singer, Neil Fallon, he actually, most of what I know about H.P. Lovecraft comes from his music.
Oh, cool.
He's a D&D nerd, he's a science fiction nerd, and a lot of his songs are just excerpts from all this stuff. And he gets a lot of requests for, hey, what's this song about? What's this song about? And for years, he'd just be like, look, it's better that you just tell me what you think this song is about, because if I tell you, you guys are gonna be really disappointed. So anyway, he finally gave in, and he did like a 4 YouTube video series about his songs. Like, this is a song, this is my most requested song, what you guys want to know about. Here's what it's about. And people are like, that's really what the song's about. And he's like, I told you it was just better. So
yeah, definitely.
I was one of those people. I was bummed out.
When some deep thing, it was just like, oh no,
man,
it's just
I would dissect every lyric. I'm like, this guy knows. And some of the videos, he's like, I put those 2 words together because they rhymed well. And I put like a 20-page essay on what those 2 words meant together. And he's just like, yeah, they just rhymed well together.
Well, even if that was the original intention, you can still interpret it any way you want. Like, just because the original way it was written describes one thing, I mean, who's to say that how you imagine it is not a completely valid way of taking it? Like, sometimes stuff like that happens where, like, even the original intention can be shaped into something else, and it still makes sense.
Well, it works for me. Yeah.
See, now I want to do another side podcast where we take songs and have you dissect them.
Oh God, you don't. You don't. Because half the time I think they're saying a word and they're not saying a word.
That makes it great. That's much better. All right, your first one's gonna be These Hoes from
like last week's episode's Marinara Trench.
Marinara Trench.
I was in a.
Go ahead.
I was just in a really hardcore rant, and then you two guys started laughing at me. I didn't realize what I had said.
So speaking of the Marinara Trench in Pacific Rim, so I'm on Hulu, and after I bought like 30 movies, I can't find anything to watch, so I'm browsing through there, and they have Atlantic Rim on Hulu.
That's got to be a Asylum production.
It has to be. It's on my queue. I'm gonna watch it, but.
Brought to you by the same people who brought Transmorphers.
Oh god, that was so terrible.
After Transformers came out,
I saw Transmorphers 1. I did not bother to go into the sequels.
And when Battleship came out, I believe they released USS Battleship. I believe is what their response to that was.
Yes,
and probably Nicolas Cage is in all of them. The next thing, this kind of goes along with the last one, but sanity's fragility and vulnerability. Characters in many of Lovecraft's stories are unable to cope mentally with the extraordinary and almost incomprehensible truths they witness, hear, or discover.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, going back to what Connor was talking about, the color out of space that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Like, you try and imagine something that you can't fathom, and that is pretty much everything in Lovecraft. You know, you imagine a color that you've never seen before, or like if you ever seen a tesseract, which is the only digital mock-up of a fourth dimensional object.
I saw it in the Avengers. I believe I saw that.
No, not the magic item. The legitimate. There's a fourth dimensional item. And you can on Google it's called a tesseract, and as it spins, it moves in a way that you cannot spatially conceive it. And yeah, all you have to do is look at those two things for me personally, and like you can feel your mind start to break. Like there's like I can't handle it.
Yeah, like everybody thinks that it's just like, oh no, it's a thing, it's got slime and tentacles, but yeah, it's like what you said, it's things moving in different dimensions the human can't normally perceive, and trying to perceive that is what makes you go insane.
Last one, questionable. You guys have to explain this one to me. Questionable parentage. Relatives or characters are typically depicted as paranormal, dysfunctional, or abnormal, whereas intimate relations in general are often represented as foreboding, mysterious, and sinister. Sounds about. So I guess he didn't do well in the love department. Did he have a bad childhood or something?
I don't know much about his pre-adult He may have. I know he got married at one point.
I'm pretty sure he was on good terms with his wife.
So it was just like a theme he had, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit, but I think part of that also is when we were talking about vulnerability in horror films, that kind of nudity. Like when you start looking at socially, you look at the people who give you the most comfort. They're real close friends. They're your family, your loved ones. And if you strip that away, it provides a whole new sense of vulnerability and isolation. So to me, I feel like those elements kind of help reinforce that to build up the horror and suspense.
Okay. All right. Next section. I just got a few Lovecraftian-esque. They're not Lovecraft movies. They're Lovecraftian-esque movies. In my opinion, knock me down if I'm wrong. Altitude. It was a Canadian horror film. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, but I remember seeing the promo
about?
pictures. Got like the 747 and these giant tentacles reaching out of the clouds at it.
It's a puddle hopper. It's not a 747.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Have you seen it?
I have not.
The main baddie from Hellboy.
Oh yeah, that is 100% Lovecraftian inspired. I mean, space tentacles and everything.
And this is my opinion. I could be wrong. The creature from the mist.
Well, I never saw The Mist, but I read the short story, and it could be most like I guess those creatures were trans-dimensional, but they seemed like they still existed in 3 dimensions. They were just biology that was dangerous and unfamiliar.
Okay.
I mean, there are entities like that in Lovecraft. There are plenty of things that aren't quite so mind-bending, but they're still disconcerting. So I suppose it would still count.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like The Mist to me really felt like Stephen King's love letter to H.P. Lovecraft. Like, kind of a nod to what he has done in all of his things. Because, like, Stephen King tends to be a little bit more down to earth with his creatures, and that was very fanciful.
Pennywise the clown?
Yeah, he was just a clown that ate fear.
Well,
like,
No.
If you
he's
see
he's from space. He's a creature from space.
he's from space?
Yeah.
The end of the movie, Pennywise is basically like a smaller portion of some kind of spider entity.
Yeah, I remember seeing the spider in the...
Yeah, he's a giant. He landed on. He's from somewhere out of space. He lands on Earth, which became Derry, Maine, and then he's eventually woken up, and he feeds off the clown is just what he uses to sweeten his victims.
Yeah, and even
Right,
like the
okay.
spider is a smaller part of something else. Like I believe he called it the deadlights or something.
Yeah.
It was like another like maybe similar to the color out of space, where it was basically like a living light wavelength made of evil or something like that. It's been a while since I read the book.
Have you seen the remake yet?
Yeah, I saw the remake, yeah.
So when he opens his mouth.
Yeah.
Spoiler, sorry.
I've seen it.
Oh, okay. And God, what's her name? The redhead. That's what the light is. It's the dead light coming out of his mouth.
Okay, all right.
And then his alter his arch nemesis is actually a turtle.
Right. I was surprised they didn't have the turtle in the.
But he did have. He
had the little
yeah,
toy.
I kind of laughed, and everyone's like, "What are you laughing?" I was like, "Well, never mind. Don't worry about it."
Interesting. All right. So, moral of the story: read the book. Don't just watch the movies.
If you have a lot, cause I'm a slow reader, so
It's a pretty big book.
yeah, it is.
And what was weird is the new movie, like, it went the complete past, and then I assume in the second one they're going to do the present. But in the original, it would time skip. Like, it would start in the younger days, move to the older, and then skip back. And the other weird thing is, like, I think I remember the original, like, they were adults in the 80s, and in the remake, the 80s is when they were kids, so, like, they shifted the whole thing forward a season or whatever.
We got into a huge argument over that. Connor. Don't.
We did on the books to movies episode, but yeah, you're right. I think they did that to make the story more relevant to today's family, so that way when they jump forward to the present time, you'll have people with modern technology and stuff.
Okay, this one actually is an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation, From Beyond. I love the movie. Stuart Gordon directed it. Okay, it's about a scientist. He creates this device that resonates at a certain frequency, and it allows these creatures to come in, and it affects the pineal gland, and everyone gets really sexual, but it goes crazy, and it sucks him into whatever Anyway, it's got giant. It's got giant. It's got giant tentacle creatures in it. It's from the late '80s. It's got Jeffrey Combs in it.
Okay.
Check it out. From Beyond.
Interesting. So, device that resonates a certain sound, is that Migos then?
I think Migos have technology that's capable of it. And then, like you said about the pineal gland, do you remember anything more about the monsters in that movie?
Oh, okay. They were in the movie. I don't know about the book. In the movie, they were like They were like eels floating in the air. And because I listened to the audio commentary, and they said the short story is only it's just like the first part of the movie. The rest of the movie they made up. But
if it's eels, that's not a Migo. Migo look more like crustaceans.
Well, I looked it up because I didn't want to sound like an idiot. The books actually call it From Beyond, or the stories actually call it From Beyond. So if that helps you guys out at all.
Yeah, see, my knowledge is still limited. I've heard the name, I don't remember the story.
Well, are you looking it up?
Yep.
Okay, I'll tread water while you're doing that. And then, in 2005, there was a silent film adaptation by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society called The Call of Cthulhu.
Cthulhu?
Yeah. It was shot very Nosferatu, very impressionistic, but it's a silent film. Either one of you guys seen that?
I have not seen it, but I'm familiar with the story.
Anyone else want to throw in any Lovecraftian-esque movies or any Lovecraftian... I guess Reanimator, that's a Lovecraft story.
Oh, yeah, Herbert West.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read that one, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyone else throw any more out?
For movies, not really. Sadly, this
or any board games, anything. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the gaming culture is filled with Cthulhu mythos. I mean, it's hard to find a board game that doesn't have a Cthulhu expansion of some kind. I mean, the most popular one is one that Connor and I absolutely love, Eldritch Horror, which, yeah, you can see on the game shelf behind me. Basically, globe-trotting in the 1920s and choosing a particular elder god to fight against.
Oh, yeah, and the game espouses that feel of Lovecraft. The game is not kind. There are many ways it can chain react and just kill you. I think I've died turn 2 before. The game can stretch out to 8 hours depending how many players there are. And yeah, there was just some kind of catastrophic event that was going on in London, and I believe it was a star vampire came out of the portal there, and the cook couldn't kill it, with the spear of destiny somehow. And
wait, why does the cook got the spear of destiny?
She's got like a whole paladin thing going on.
Yeah, there's I think what's most interesting about that game is that every time I play it, and Connor and I have had similar experiences where it feels like the game's alive. There are just certain things that will react. Like there's in the game you have to collect certain kind of tokens, in one game I was playing, you had to close the portals to the other world that the monsters are coming through, and the first thing that we did was close all the portals through another card, and we had to wait for them to reopen so we could close them for the objective, and almost loses the game because you're on a timer, so you don't have a whole lot of time to mess around. Or my favorite story is when one of Connor's characters was set on fire in Australia, and then the next card, Sydney, burnt to the ground.
Oh yeah, it was the cook again.
Yeah, it was the cook. Yeah.
And if you read
you guys need to get rid of that cook, man. No good.
Yeah, like in her backstory, apparently her parents died in a fire when she was young.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so essentially, what happened was she was trapped in a bushfire. Somehow got very traumatized by it. Had, I guess, a piece of her clothing still on fire. Walked back into the city and exploded the refinery somehow.
Oh, that was another thing I wanted to bring up in our kaiju section. Can the kaijus not destroy landmarks? It's always the San Francisco Bridge, the Sydney Opera House, Big Ben.
Yeah, I mean, Golden Gate Bridge has gotten destroyed so many times.
Yeah, it's not even funny anymore. Okay. All right. Oh, by the way, our other show we're getting ready to do, 3 Dudes in a Review.
Yes.
Us 3 can do. I got From Beyond. I watch it all the time. We can review it.
I'm in.
Okay. You want to watch the movie? Not tonight.
Yeah. At some point, yeah.
Okay.
At some point, I would like to watch another movie in my life. Yes.
Okay. All right, now I did not do any research on this. I did the family tree of what I know. So I want to test you guys, or you guys test me how well I know. The information I know is from, don't cheat. The information I know is from YouTube videos, Neil Fallon lyrics, and the few movies I know. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna go. You guys correct me when I'm wrong. Be gentle. Okay. Azathoth. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So far?
Yeah.
He's the blind idiot.
The David Sultan.
Okay, so he sleeps. He created this universe. They keep him asleep because if he wakes up, one of the things is if he wakes up, we pop out of existence because we are his dream.
Right. The universe is the dream of the idiot.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah.
one of the one of the ideas is that he was actually. There's two that I know. Correct me if I'm wrong. One is he's actually not the great God. There's actually people above him. Another one is there was a massive war. He wasn't always an idiot. There was a massive war, and he's the last survivor of his kind.
Sort of a precursor to an earlier universe or something like that.
Huh. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a terrifying thought.
Okay, he had 3 kids that I know of. Like he's probably got more, so just stay with me here. Neerlepetef.
Yeah.
That's the Dark Pharaoh, right?
Crawling
Yes.
Chaos. Hey,
Oh,
Crawling Chaos. Okay. He is different in the fact that he's actually here. He mingles with the humans. He's usually disguised as a leader of some kind. He's also different because he's purposeful in his actions. He enjoys death, chaos, and destruction, whereas the other ones just are. They just are what they are.
so I have to put on my Mike hat because this is where Mike would step in.
Fuck, here we go.
So kind of like American politics, right? Right. All right. That's for you, Mikey. All right.
How bad was I on that one?
No, I think that sounds about accurate. I honestly have not heard of him.
Oh, he's one of the most famous ones. Like, he's like the only one that mostly notices. Like, there are very few that are higher up than he is, but for some reason he actually pays attention and finds humanity interesting. But he finds him interesting in a way a kid with a magnifying glass finds ants interesting.
Yeah, because they
okay.
say it's good that he's mean to us because if he ever loses interest in us, we wipe out of existence. He'll wipe us out.
Huh. Does he have another name?
Neolepetef and Crawling Chaos.
He has
okay,
the many masks. He probably has the most personas out of any entity. Like the Black Pharaoh was one of them. Supposedly, he was a pharaoh in ancient Egypt and got sealed away, or an avatar of him or something. The Haunter of the Dark was another one of his avatars in that story. And
God, they're so depressing.
if anyone had ever seen the Dark Tower movie not too long ago, the villain in that was supposedly another one of his avatars.
Matthew McConaughey,
Yes.
he was Neolepetef.
Oh, Flag.
Oh, that was
Yes.
Interesting.
Flag. The only one of the few. Flag was in Eyes of the Dragon, Dragon Eyes.
And most famously in Stand too, which was I've talked about it.
You're always
before.
pushing that.
Stand, man.
You
That
and
is
your
my
Stand
favorite.
propaganda. Okay, another child, I guess. Nameless Mist.
I've heard of that one before. I don't know too much about the Nameless Mist.
That's all I know. Nameless Mist.
Okay, check.
And Darkness.
Yeah, that's another one I know, but not too much about.
Okay, Nameless Myth had Yog Sothoth. I learned how to pronounce it. Yog Sothoth.
Is it Yog Sothoth?
I've always pronounced it Yog Sothoth. It might not be the correct, but that's how I've always done it.
And he is the key, or the keeper. He is the gatekeeper. He is the key, right? That's his nickname.
He is the key and he is the gate.
Damn, I knew something like that.
One of the biggest theories about him is in any sort of setting where there's like a multiverse, there's always the space in between. He is the space in between.
Interesting. All right.
He basically is the dominion over portals and magic. Pretty much any source of magic comes from him ultimately.
And he's depicted as just a blob with many eyes.
Yeah, he's one of the standard, eyes blob tentacle sort of thing, but like again, sort of pushing into that Tesseract fifth dimensional sort of thing you cannot comprehend at the same time, because he is essentially in all places at all times, but the true force of him exists outside of reality. He is trapped there, but can still manifest in the various universes.
A little bit of sizzle. He has a very famous grandson. I'll get to him.
All right.
Darkness had a child, Shub Niggurath.
Ah, yes. Shub Niggurath is actually my favorite.
Man, I said that. Man, I fucking love
Yeah.
She, a fertile goddess,
She's the
Black
mother of.
goat of the woods with 1,000 young.
Okay.
That's all I know, so I'll let you guys talk.
Oh, yeah. Any sort of like a mother of monsters sort of thing, like a echidna from Greek mythology, perhaps the original incarnation of Tiamat sort of thing. She's basically that. Basically the mother of monsters. Pretty much any sort of monstrous entity comes from her. Like pretty much the epitome of unkind nature, like eat, kill, survive. Like the way like that's another one of those tentacles and darkness sort of things, but like the hallmarks of her are typically tree-like sort of beings, like look like dead trees, sort of like branching and the tentacles sort of thing. And the other thing is goat-like features.
Okay.
Where like probably the most famous of the monsters associated with her are called the Dark Young of Shub Niggurath. And what they look like is, imagine if a dead tree had 3 legs and goat horns and eyes and stuff all over it.
I'm picturing it now.
Yes.
Is terrifying. While we're on the topic of the mother of monsters, this is something that I found really, really interesting when we were talking, I think it was a few weeks ago, but what was the creature that existed at right angles, and right angles only? Because I think that really kind of helped defines what H.P. Lovecraft was.
What was it? Dunwich Horror?
I think it was the Hounds of Tyndalus.
Yeah, maybe it was those guys.
I don't even remember if those were strictly Lovecraft or something that was added in later in the mythos. But yeah, those guys are very interesting as well. They're called hounds, but I assume they don't look like dogs. Possibly there's some kind of quadrupedal shape to them. But the interesting thing is about them is basically I think they're the punishment for time traveling. If you somehow time travel, they can detect this. They can travel to you, and then they try to eliminate you.
So they only live at right angles. So you can only see them.
Yeah, like they use right angles as doors or something like that. Like they can come through. So if
any
you get
sort of corner, they can manifest themselves through, pull them out through it, and that is how they get to you.
Okay, Masters of Horror. I did an episode where this guy. It was based on, I think it's called The Witch's House. Does that sound right?
Oh yeah, the Dreams of the Witch House.
Dreams of the Witch House. Yeah, was that the guys you're talking about? Because he was in the room and he was like looking at the angles of the way the walls was, and he.
I think maybe like that is an example of the sort of thing that they use. I don't know if they were in that story specifically, but like it's the same sort of concept.
Okay.
It's a recurring theme though of somehow using angles to traverse space, another sort of like Yog-Sothoth sort of thing.
I'm screwed. I can't do math. Okay, so those two had 2 children, Nug and Yeb. I know nothing about them other than their name.
From what I've seen, and I haven't seen too much, like they aren't quite as popular, but they're very similar to their mother at least. Every depiction of that Nug I've seen basically just looks like a huge dead tree branch in the sky coming down with tentacles.
That's kind of cool.
And the Yeb kind of looks like a bug with too many legs.
Okay.
with just too many, just not a number, it's too many.
So
all the legs.
So Yog-Sothoth's grandson and Nug's son would be Cthulhu, the Great Dreamer. Mm-hmm. Now, all I know about him is he established Raylu.
Oh, Riley.
It's underwater. He sleeps. Right, waiting to come back. The deep ones. He's their father.
I don't think he's their father, but he's they worship. The father of the deep ones is Father Dagon.
Dang, I knew that too. There's another movie I've seen. I knew that too. Okay, I apologize. And there's this really creepy picture on the internet of these like World War II. I think it's World War II, World War One maybe, where they were on a battleship and they fall into the water, and you could see them like sinking in the water, and there's like Cthulhu underneath the water with his glowing eye. Shit like that creeps me out, man. That's why I don't go in the ocean.
I think that's another one of Lovecraft's recurring themes. Is he was also incredibly terrified of the ocean.
Oh, I am. I have panic attacks. Because I think things like that actually exist in the Marinara Trench.
Maybe they do. With their meatballs.
And the only other one, I don't... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, well, I was just going to say about Cthulhu, that I think it's really interesting that the one entity that gets the most popularity out of Lovecraft is the water creature. And I feel like that's really rare if you look at other entities, that the water creature always tends to get thrown aside, Aquaman, Namor, just as a kind of popular examples in favor of maybe the air, the fire, or the earth entities. So I think it's really interesting that Cthulhu is one of the only kind of watery creatures that get super crazy popular.
Cthulhu is Namor's dad?
Maybe. I mean, there could be some off family relationship there. I mean, Cthulhu's a dick, Namor's a dick.
I know in the extended canon, Cthulhu had at least 3 daughters.
Really?
But they look more like him, big squiddy dragon things.
Oh, so I'm not going to meet Ariel and she's going to take me home to Cthulhu.
And the only other one we talked about before the show was Hastur?
Yep, King in Yellow.
Alright. Okay, so I'm keeping you guys too long, so I'll speed it up. Tropes of a Lovecraftian monster. I didn't look this up. This is just what I got on top of my head. So tell me if I'm wrong. Tropes of a Lovecraftian monster. Tentacles.
So for some, yeah. I mean, the extendo limbs is kind of a scary concept.
You do see that. I mean, Cthulhu is the obvious example, but then you also have things like Yog-Sothoth, Shub-Niggurath has tentacles, and then even some of the lesser things like. The elder things and the great race of Yith also have tentacles.
It wasn't Neolepetef. Didn't he? The pictures I saw, like his bottom half was like he rolled on tentacles, like who am I trying to think of in popular culture? Like Ursula from.
Okay.
From
oh yeah, he is also depicted like that in his true form, I suppose, if you can even call it that.
Okay, another one I got. Wait a minute. Indescribable horror and features with odd names.
Yeah, I mean, the odd, unpronounceable names, I think, just adds more to that kind of cosmic element of unfathomability. I mean, there's nothing to me scarier than something that I cannot conceptualize, and that is absolutely terrifying to me. Okay. Something that my eyes could not define.
Yeah, I think it's just like your senses have limits, and what lies beyond those limits is terrifying because it's the unknown, and people are afraid of the unknown.
Do you think, real quick, I'm not poking fun of this because I really like this stuff, but I'm not a little bit of a jab. You think he just makes these names up and is like, good luck pronouncing them because they're aliens, so you're not really pronouncing them right?
I've heard that was a lot of the intention of what it was, actually. You were maybe not supposed to pronounce it, you were just supposed to look at it and say, boy, that's a weird name.
So he's just like, I wonder how these dudes are going to pronounce this, and he just...
Well,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, time for an elder god name, just hand on the typewriter.
Yeah,
4 vowels in a row, that works.
If you're not supposed to be able to comprehend what they look like, you're not supposed to technically be able to pronounce their name correctly either.
Hey, here's a word with the only the only non-consonant's a Q with no U. Good luck with that.
I slammed my fist into the typewriter twice. That is his name.
I got drunk, fell asleep on the typewriter. That's what happened. Another trope is cosmic. Cosmic?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of built that genre. I mean, when you talk about Lovecraftian horror, the usual term you use is cosmic horror.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, I could be wrong on this, the monster is not the focus, it's the effects on the hero in the world is more the focus of the story.
Right. The focus is not exactly the monster itself specifically, but rather how insignificant you are when compared to the monster.
Yeah, I mean, I think the very little of the actual protagonist confronting the elder deities, the elder gods. To me, it kind of connects to some of the Sandman books by Neil Gaiman, where your main character doesn't even appear in the book. Mostly, you go to read for Dream and Desire and all of those characters, and they don't even show up until the last few panels, and everything else has been.
Well, except for the first run though, because it was about him escaping.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of the times it's okay. Here's Dream in the first panel, and you're going to see him through the entire book. And there's other times where you're reading a book and Dream doesn't show up until the last chapter, maybe.
Agreed. Okay.
Yeah.
Or even speaking of dreams, that was a whole other facet of the Lovecraftian mythos that was not quite as explored in a lot of it. Is the whole thing with the dreamlands. Like supposedly, like the land of dreams is its own separate plane of reality that people's minds can access while they're dreaming, but it's a plane like any other. Like you can go through a portal and step into the lands of dreams. Like I think the protagonist had a key that would allow him to access the dreamlands physically.
So you could be awake and enter it.
Yes.
And so would you still have to go through Yog-Sothoth?
I believe so. I believe the silver key had something to do with Yog-Sothoth.
I kind of gave up halfway through his name. Okay, so real quick, I'm keeping you guys too long. Real quick, what does it take to write a Lovecraft? Because we're gonna write a Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror movie. What does it take to write one? What do we dislike? What's something we could add to them? Because he was really big onto this. What's something we could add? Don't even think about it too hard, unless you already got something. Just what would you add to the mythos?
Well, how like a lot of it is like. There's purists that want to always say, well, okay, well, the theme is mankind is insignificant, mankind cannot triumph, it is hopeless, you are dust, the end. But I've seen a couple of them, and this is my opinion, and I would probably get some flack for this for a lot of other people, but I like the ones where maybe it is sort of successful when you fight back. Like maybe, okay, so the victory wasn't that great, but okay, you prove that maybe mankind can actually influence things a little bit. Pay attention to us just a little bit, please. Like, maybe not go out so far as throwing dynamite at every sort of little thing, but okay, maybe one little thing, one little piece of its army died. Okay, we influence things just a little bit. Maybe we're not completely insignificant.
So show them that they're not as infallible as they think they are.
Yeah.
Well, that would be an interesting twist. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I would go with an ascendancy plot. Where you have kind of a very noir film. You have your protagonist going against the elder deities, looking through the cultists.
But how are you going to go against them, though, when Azathoth is just... how would you depict that?
Well, to me, it wouldn't be against Azathoth himself. It would be against his followers, his monsters, his minions.
So you're fighting the cult.
Right, you're fighting the cult, and then, at the end of the giant climax, you find out that he's all been trying to prove his worth to this entity, and this entity extends him to a godhood or corruption into a giant monster of some kind.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because in my recommendations, I got just what you described.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. Anything else? Likes, dislikes? Is there something we dislike about the genre that every time you read it, you're just like, oh, again? Like every Batman comic, they always throw in the pearls in the shot. I dislike that.
That's fair.
Is there anything in H.P. Lovecraft you don't really care for? Or you just maybe not care for, just like, oh, here we go. He's kind of...
To me, and it doesn't have to be in all Lovecraftian stories, but in some of them, I would kind of like to see less bad come from the use of magic. Now, granted, all magic comes from Yog-Sothoth, so there has to be some sort of penalty and all of that to make magic interesting or whatever. But to me, I would kind of like to see that where magic doesn't have this massive drawback, and you have kind of almost like a legitimate man of magic kind of character in a book.
There was actually one story like that. The Dunwich Horror actually was one of the few stories where the protagonist actually made any sort of difference. And ironically, the creature that they sealed away with the magic was Yog-Sothoth's son, the Dunwich Horror itself.
Interesting.
I believe it was invisible, and they used a spell to render it tangible, and they might have killed it with another spell. It's been a while since I read that one, but yeah, it was Yog-Sothoth's actual son, this big, fleshy blob monster that would look vaguely human, and they used magic to kill it. Ironically, using his father's own spells against him.
Has Constantine ever run across Yog-Sothoth in anything?
I don't think by name, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't anything Cthulhu inspired.
Like a little fanboy nod.
Yeah, kind of like the nod in Hellboy. Okay. So I think there has to be something in Constantine, more than likely in the Hellblazer run.
Okay.
From Vertigo.
Yeah. Well, we're wrapping up. So anything anyone wants to add at all? It doesn't have to. Anything Lovecraftian? Anything anything.
Movie wise, the first Hellboy. Game wise, if you don't mind getting kicked below the belt a few times, Eldritch Horror.
Or Arkham, if that's more your speed.
That's the one you. I just spit on myself. That's the one you recommended me, right? That one time?
Arkham Horror. Yeah, we talked about that.
Okay. There was a PS4 or Xbox One game that just came out that was based on. Is that judging by your look, it wasn't very good?
I haven't played it yet, but I'm excited to try it. I believe it was called Call of Cthulhu. I think is what it was called.
What kind? I'm assuming it's not a first-person shooter.
No, I believe it's kind of an Evil Within with a little less violence, more of a traditional like horror romp. Very excited to try it. Have not tried it yet.
Okay. You got any recommendations? Games, books?
Other than that, there's the Call of Cthulhu RPG system. I've played that a couple times. It's pretty entertaining.
Okay. I recommend the movie you're talking about called The Void. It's not connected to H.P. Lovecraft. It's just inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. Very much. What happens is a woman is taken to a hospital. They're in the middle of this hospital's being shut down, so there's just a skeleton crew until the ER is running up on the new hospital. The woman that's taken there, it was rescued from a cult. The cult comes to get her, and then all of this very cosmic creatures start attacking the woman because she's very important to the cult. So it's called The Void.
Interesting.
It's on Netflix now. I'm not for sure for how long, but of course I recommend the Call of Cthulhu. It's the silent film made in 2005. There's a YouTube channel called Mr. H Reviews, which is where I learned most of my stuff. He goes through all the mythos and breaks down the creatures and everything. And the Dunsmuir song Crawling Chaos.
Oh, that reminds me. There is a parody artist. I believe he calls his style Filk. His name is Evan Brooks, and he does a parody of Hey There Delilah called Hey There Cthulhu.
Oh,
very funny.
Very funny.
Very funny.
As good as Weird Al?
He's not quite Weird Al funny, but like he does more geek humor, and more stuff like that. Like he does superhero parodies and stuff.
Okay. Well, if you want to sign us out.
Yeah, absolutely. So Damage Control Podcasting is being recorded at Underdark Comics and Games
in the back room.
In the back room today, because we're doing it during business hours. Next to my giant pile of cardboard boxes. We are located in Quincy, Illinois. Make sure you come by and see us. Check out our Facebook page at Facebook/Underdark Comics, and check out our website underdarkquincy.com. Send us an email, send us a Facebook message. Just come in, stop in, and say hi.
And thank you, Connor.
Oh, that was my pleasure.
Thank you very much, Connor.
All right. And